Hi, this is Jonah Dempsey, and I'm in Ibiza. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the grouping of the lines. Actually, we're going to start with grouping of the colors. So, in our whole series, we were looking at basically binaries. Like you can look at the binaries of the tones. We looked at the splenic binary, ajna binary, solar plexus binary. We looked at the binaries of the colors, which from the perspective of Steve Rhodes are the low, medium, and high resilience. Then we looked at the binaries of the lines, which also group into reactivity, the reactive lines, the opportunistic lines, and the initiating lines. Now, it's also common to look at the upper-lower trigram, basically the harmony. And so the harmonic lines, obviously, 1, 4, we know is a harmonic profile, 2, 5, 3, 6. The colors, we call that color transference. And then the tones, it's not done as much, but there is, the way of grouping the tones, looking at what is the first tone, how does it relate to the fourth tone, how does the second relate to the fifth, and how does the third relate to the sixth. It's not done as much at the tonal level. Well, what I want to look at today is looking at the 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, 6 grouping. And actually, we're going to start with color. We're going to start with color here. So when it comes to color, 1, 3, and 5 are the active colors. 2, 4, and 6 are the passive colors. Now, this is not something that Ross said as far as I know. I've heard a few different people say it. I know James Alexander says this. He may not use the terms active and passive, but that's the gist of it. I believe he got this sort of approach from Kumud Kabir, who's also, she was sort of tasked by Ra with developing some of the substructure work, PHS and things like that, and also Magic Square, and studying that. He would task people with, studying different things. And so I'm not exactly sure if this source is from her or if there actually is a Ra lecture where he says this at some point, but it's a really interesting lens to approach color. And what I want to ask today, and then in the next videos we'll look at the same thing for tone and line, what I want to ask, if we use these keynotes we've been exploring, which at the color level are pessimism, realism, optimism, first and second color pessimistic, third and fourth color realistic, fifth and sixth color optimistic, does this tell us anything through the lens of active and passive? And I think it does. What it gives us is that there's an active and passive version of each of these categories. See, if 1, 3, and 5 are active colors, fear is actively learning, 3 actively leading, you could say. Because 1 is either actively learning or teaching, 3 is actively leading or following. And then I guess 5 is the active messenger and actively fixing, like we say, like guilt fixes things. Well, usually what you can do is use this as sort of a marker for transference. I'm an active color, color 3, so I can tell I'm in my transference. If I get really passive, I just want to stay out of it, I don't want to get involved, that's me transferring to innocence. If someone's fear and they transfer to need, active to passive, right? They can kind of tell they're in transference. And the same thing, if you're a guilt person and you're like, well, I hope it's going to work out, I'm just going to wait and see what happens, that can be the active guilt transferring to the passive hope. Now, the obverse is obviously also true. If you're a hope person and you're getting really worked up and trying to fix it, you're probably in transference. If you're a need person and you're trying to do something about it because of your fear, you're probably in transference. If you're an innocence person and getting really involved and picking sides and getting in the middle of it, that's the transference. So now I want to just apply the lens of pessimism, realism, optimism. Well, what we see is there's 2 variants of each. First and second color are the active and passive versions of pessimism. The first color, the teacher, the fear, that is active pessimism. I'm actively pessimistic about this thing. Hope is the passive pessimism. What's worth hoping for? Pessimistic hope. The true intelligence of hope is not hoping for the wrong thing. What's really worth hoping for? Where should I put my hope? Where should we hope for a future? Where is it not worth even trying to hope for a future there? There is no future there. Hope is like there's a future there versus there's no future there. That's what hope's about, right? And we see that active and passive forms of pessimism. Now, I have the active form of realism. Being a leader, taking sides, trying to drive certain outcomes and goals, dealing with constraints and outcomes and a right and a wrong and a good and a bad and what we should do in a situation, all this kind of stuff, very active. Well, need is more of the passive realism where the master does what needs to be done, but it's in this sort of receptive passive state, not all amped up, right? And then optimism, we have the same thing, the same two variants. Guilt is active optimism, let's fix it. Innocence, passive optimism, let's just allow it to be. So in the next video, I'm going to apply the same structure to the lines and the tones. We're going to think about it together because I haven't actually thought that much about if it even works at that level. We're going to see what we find out. Stay tuned for the next one. Thanks for watching.